This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Emerald, I know that if you were in New South Wales, you'd probably vote for the Greens in the upcoming state election. But I just want you to consider some other options. You know, there's some other parties out there with some cool policies.
I would vote for whoever can deliver a sort of, what would I say, a manifesto for my, I don't know,
for freedom?
Is there anyone that's doing something like that?
Well, it's crazy that you mentioned that, actually, because the Liberal Democrats of New South Wales, a couple of weeks ago, we've been sitting on this for a while, just laid out what their priorities are for the New South Wales state election in 2023. And they are as follows. Capitalism, check.
Tick.
Nuclear.
Nuclear. Are you one of those people?
Nuclear. COVID justice. Tick. No idea what the fuck that is. What does that mean?
Tick. COVID justice. Tom. Well, actually, you can find out further in the tweet thread, but
okay.
Continue.
Great. Colorblind. Tick.
You know what? I like that. I like justice for colorblind people.
Oh, COVID justice.
COVID justice for Tom.
Oh, boy. And, of course, cut spending as well. That's a big old tick for the Liberal Democrats.
Can I just really quickly, what's the flag that they've got on here?
That's the New South Wales state flag, I assume.
Oh, okay.
You know, everyone loves their state flag. I can't get enough of it.
I mean, in Queensland, I would recognise the Queensland one, but I guess I just didn't recognise this one.
Liberal Democrats, like the Liberals, but with conviction. This is courtesy of John Ruddock, who people may know used to be in the Liberal Party. He's out of his fucking mind. Has been on Q&A, loves Trump.
Oh.
Absolute failure across the board when it came to federal election, of course. I didn't think, because Lionhelm used to be in there, but I think he's all gone. They don't have the equivalent of Liberal Democrats anymore.
Well, maybe because they didn't promote their colourblind policy strongly enough.
Clearly, yes. So I haven't actually read the whole thread. There's a beautiful thing here about how awesome capitalism is. Quoting Margaret Thatcher, capitalism is a system that brings wealth to the many, not just the few. Which is funny because it's like the opposite of that.
It's literally the opposite.
Well, what is the colourblind policy? Governments should be race blind. Martin Luther King settled this when he taught us to judge others by their character and not their skin colour. The proponents of positive racism may have good intentions, but their strategy doesn't work. Encouraging individuals to believe their destiny is determined by their ancestry is a curse. Acknowledgement of country and welcome to country should cease on all New South Wales government property. That's wild.
It's They want to take. They're very upset about the Aboriginal flag flying on the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yes.
They've got this quote in 2018 of Perrottet being like, "No, we don't really need a flag," and then 2022 being like, "We're going to fly the flag," and they're very mad about this. Which I thought libertarians loved flags, didn't they? So, I don't know what they're so upset about. It's almost as though maybe they're just racist, but that can't be it. They're colourblind.
How does being colourblind relate to white people? Because white's not a colour, it's a shade.
Yeah, it's actually a shade. So, yeah. No, that's really clever. I didn't realize that the Liberal Democrats were so culture warry and not just economically libertarian. This isn't just about, they've got stuff about abolishing, stamp duty and reducing taxes and stuff, but it's all the language is just extreme dog whistles. They say fund students, not bureaucrats.
Yeah.
And they're talking about just giving people education vouchers instead of funding an education institution so that people can choose what they want. But the way they describe this is some parents may choose a curriculum focused on gender, climate change, and First Nations, while others may choose a more traditional approach. Why put that there?
So you get a school voucher. You go to the free market of schools and you say,
"Hello, I'd like to order climate change and First Nations."
Yeah, I'd like to order a Marxist transgender First Nations school, please.
Yeah.
The Greens have really taken a far left radical view that I would even say is left of the most radical left person in California.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia. Serious danger to Australia.
Well, it's the best state in the country. I'm sure it's going to be totally fine. And we're going to be discussing it on this week's episode of Serious Danger. That's what this podcast is. My name is Tom Ballard. Emerald Moon.
Emerald Moon.
There you are.
Some say I'm from New South Wales. I dispute it. I don't know if we've discussed this on the show before. I'm from South Queensland.
Oh.
Some would say that I was born and raised in the northern rivers of New South Wales, but borders are fake. So
It's all, yes, open borders across the country. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael Griffin. And yes, we're going to be chatting with, well, everyone will be chatting with specifically.
Tom refuses to speak to women. He's like, I've spoken to one woman this week and that's it. It's really fucked up.
She's the Greens Upper-House candidate. For the New South Wales Greens, Lynda-June Coe is going to be our guest. I'm sorry that this might be some weird technical issues going on here, but some very boring reasons for that. But don't worry, you'll have a fantastic conversation with Emerald and Lynda on the way.
It's pretty good. Thank you to our new patrons this week, William, Stella, Shailene, Helen, and John, our absolute royalty. They maybe joined up to listen to our episode on the Greens and wokeness and whether it's destroying the party and who's woke, who's not, what does it all mean? There are so many good bloody episodes on there. If you're not on Patreon, what are you even doing? It's only $3 a month. And without it, we literally can't do the podcast. So are you trying to destroy us? Not to kill you or anything. We have a message here from one of our dear patrons, Logan, who says, I did get accused of having woke ideas this week for suggesting that Rogan and Musk weren't intellectual giants. So this episode comes just in time. Stay woke. So what? It's just like you say something I don't like and you're woke.
And that's wokeness. Yes, criticizing like millionaires and billionaires like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk is therefore wokeness. I don't know if that criticism was coming from other like Greens members or what have you, but yes, I did that message just intrigued me. But I mean, woke is whatever you want it to be now. It's great.
Yeah, so true.
Yes, the human skin suit. It's like a second wardrobe for me. It's definitely not comfortable, especially when I'm shape-shifting back to my lizard form. But Neuralink has been working hard on a project to develop a new species of synthetic skin that grows with its wearer, thereby eliminating the need to shapeshift back and forth.
Jamie, pull that up and see if there is any genetically modified species out there on Earth that can use my nipples as a weapon of mass destruction, because that would be fucking wild, man.
Woke is working fewer than 5 days a week. That's staying woke. My brothers and sisters and non-binary friends.
Gone mad, yes, for sure. Yeah, I just thought this was some good lefty news. We're always downers on this fucking show, so I thought like we should talk about some uppers and some great news. People might have seen this being reported in. Massive, the world's biggest 4-day workweek trial ended in the UK. 60 British companies involving 3,000 employees took part in the trial. Obviously, that's the same salary if you only work 4 days a week instead of 5.
And society collapsed.
And yes, Britain is broken.
Well,
I wish it wasn't in Britain.
Well, yeah, correlation or causation. Was it the 4-day working week trial that caused the UK to completely disintegrate? Did it kill the Queen?
It killed the Queen, yes.
The Queen was so upset that people were not working on Fridays. And she was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh, my husband and I did. No, actually, it went really well. And it's probably the only good thing in Britain right now. Workers were way happier. There was better morale, less burnout, better sleep, mental health outcomes. Everyone's happy. I saw a few interviews people might have seen across the news of just ordinary British people just being like, I don't know myself. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. It was very cute.
We love that. But what about the profits, Tom? This is always the weird conversation with the 4-day work week where you're like, but productivity.
Yes. Well, actually, it was totally fine. Productivity stayed either the same or improved. Revenue increased slightly across the companies on average. And more than 90% of the companies taking part said they're going to stick with the working week permanently moving forward. Just 4% said they would not do that.
Wow. So wait, how many companies? 60?
60.
Yeah.
That's
all right.
It's
more,
pretty
please.
goddamn massive. And I just thought it was, a nice bit of good news because, of course, this is a classic idea supported by the Greens policy in some places in the country. And it's obviously derided as utopian and hippie and ridiculous. And then what do you know? It works out great. And it's actually, I think in the next decade, 4-day work week is going to become widespread common sense. And in 20 years, it'll be Labor Party policy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We spoke about this. When did we talk about this on the podcast? Was it with Scott Ludlam?
Yeah, it was.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go back far enough, you can listen to us talk about 4-day working week and why it just makes sense. But I mean, long story short, we were making all of these strides as technology improved and productivity improved and we could do more things in fewer time. the working week reduced, and we were like, hey, maybe we could do other things instead of just being fucking wage slaves our entire life.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, we just stopped reducing the working week, and in fact, in a lot of ways, probably started working more.
Yes.
And for some reason, we can't seem to get past this 5-day, 2-day hump.
Yeah.
But there is progress. Yeah, I think even in the last few years, it's become more and more acceptable. I do a 4-day work week. I do not know how anyone does a 5-day working week. It seems fucking impossible, especially if you want to volunteer. This is the thing, especially if you want to volunteer and do other shit. Like on my Fridays, I do this silly little podcast. Not that that's an argument for a 4-day work week. There could be more podcasts. But yeah, like time for caring for people, for volunteering, for, building a revolution. Just
Yes.
quietly.
Yes, of course, all the things that conservatives say they would support. Oh, we love community building. We love you spending time with your
spending time with your
traditional
family.
nuclear family.
Yeah,
You have no time to do that because you're working for the capitalists all the time, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll put the link to that story in the show notes if people want to read more about it. But congrats to Autonomy UK, which seems to be a very cool think tank that does all the stuff around this. And well done to all the British workers out there working less. I love it.
I just love working 4 days a week. I got to have breakfast.
Four days a week. 4 days a week. 4 days a week.
Yeah, the New South Wales election is coming up on the 25th of March, so it's just under a month away. And it's an interesting one where we've had Liberals have been in power in New South Wales, I think, for the last 12 years or something fucking ridiculous. And it's looking like Labor could potentially win it, which would mean many, many Labor governments, but also Labor isn't really that good there. And if they win, I feel like they'll just slide in because the Libs are so shit. Or we could have, as we've seen everywhere else, slide in the major parties vote and we get more Greens elected and we're in balance of power and we can win good things. We've already got a bunch of Greens MPs in the lower and upper house in New South Wales. We've got Balmain, Newtown and Ballina that we'll be looking to keep in the lower house. And then in the upper house, we are looking to we're going for 3 upper house seats. We've got Kate Fairman up for re-election, and then Amanda Cohn and Lynda-June Coe, who we're talking to, trying to squeak in as well. But I think next, we could potentially pick up Lismore is very close. South Coast, or I think in the interview, as you'll hear, we were talking about Shoalhaven, which overlaps with that state electorate of South Coast, where Amanda Findlay is running. Heffron, where Philippa Veitch is running. Yeah, a big swing off Labor could potentially put us into second in the South Coast. If we pip Labor in Heffron, we could win. Summer Hill, Isabella Antonio's running. Albury, you did a fundraiser in. Eli Davin is running there.
Yep.
Is it feeling like we can win in those seats? Is it feeling real?
Look, I think Eli. Oh gosh, sorry, that's my mum. Look, I think the energy in Albury is really exciting. Amanda Cohn is from Albury as well. She's a former deputy mayor in Albury as well. So yeah, she's the number 2 ticket, and she was doing amazing stuff. She's traveling the state, talking to people about the state of the regional healthcare services and how fucked it is. She's a former doctor as well, or she's a doctor, I should say. So yes, the energy and a lot of the excitement for certainly getting Amanda up is great. And Eli, who ran against Susan Lay in Farrer, the federal seat, and doubled the Greens vote last year, was fantastic.
Damn.
But yeah, that's a pretty conservative area. I think Albury, the lower house thing would be a big ask, but certainly Eli's working his guts out to make it happen. And I think getting Amanda up would be fucking sick.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's an interesting interview with Lynda, and I'm excited about the New South Wales election. It's interesting because in 2019, obviously that was right before federal election, I think, and our vote actually went backwards in a lot of these target seats. But many of our candidates in those seats now are new. They're different candidates from last time round. And it just seems like the vibe is just entirely different post-federal election, post everything that's been happening. And it could be, a really exciting result. So Lynda-June Coe, she's a Wiradjuri and a Badu Island woman, former teacher, researcher and campaigner for First Nations justice. She's also number 3 on the New South Wales Greens Senate ticket for the state election on the 25th of March. Thank you so much for coming on, Lynda.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's good to finally have. We've been meaning to do a bit of a New South Wales election campaign special. And since you're that kind of crucial third spot that the party's really trying to pick up in the election, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on how the campaign's been going. I imagine it's really like heating up at this point. We're about a month out, right?
Yeah. We're pretty much 5 weeks away from the March 2023 state election. So in the midst of it, it's got a very strong campaign. I feel our policies are hitting the nail in terms of what community are telling us these are the priority areas. And it's really just been going from strength to strength.
Yeah. How long have you been kind of really campaigning for? Has it been a long campaign?
With the Greens?
Yeah, or just on this one, like in that spot on the Upper House ticket.
Yeah, so I was made aware that I won a spot in July last year. So essentially I've been in election mode, campaign mode since that time. So 8 months.
Yeah. Are you ready for a sleep on the 26th of March?
Oh, yeah. It'll be a week-long sleep.
Yeah, we can't think about that yet because first we have to get out there and win it. So in terms of the things that are coming back from the community that like the party's chosen to campaign on those key issues, what are the really big ones that we're focusing on?
Yeah, obviously at this point in time, coal and coal seam gas and ensuring that the major parties actually commit to a solutions-based agenda. The Greens have committed to the ending of coal and coal seam gas by 2030, and we want to ensure that governments are following suit on something so serious that impacts all communities right across the state and country as well.
It's interesting, I think, and particularly in the wake of the federal election, that we now have both major parties at least pretending that they care about climate change, but it's created this really, like, the distinction now is so clear, and I think the public are really starting to get that the whole point is those major parties want to continue coal and gas and the Greens don't. And it's like, in a way, it's terrifying because we need to make them stop approving coal and gas if we want the planet to survive. But it's also like the demand is so clear, right? Like, and that surely people will be thinking about that when they head to the polls if climate is something they care about.
Absolutely. Just here in New South Wales, we've had ongoing floods, we've had the bushfires. These events are going to increase. If anything, they're going to accelerate very quickly if we don't actually intervene. And I believe the community are at the forefront of making that determination come this election.
Yeah. I've been thinking a fair bit about like climate change as a cost of living issue because, I think cost of living is like that's what a lot of people would think about when they're voting or heading into election. But it's if your house is flooded, you've suddenly got all of these like real hip pocket, immediate material things that you're dealing with. It intersects with the housing crisis in areas, think about like I went to school in Lismore, for example. And the fact that like a housing crisis was just so intensely exacerbated by the floods there. And so I know that, like housing is another one. I think that the Greens, that's probably like a top issue, I would imagine, coming into the state election.
Absolutely. With the impact of the pandemic, we've seen households really struggle throughout that entire period. The rising cost of living for me as a First Nations person has been intergenerational. I come from a community which is low income families. So we have struggled intergenerationally around trying to meet the very basic essential human rights, needs in terms of housing, education, health, access to health. The rising cost of living now impacts, a more prominent community because it's now based on classism. And it's something that I think about critically in terms of coming from that actual dynamic.
Yeah. It's, I think maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, was it, that the Greens in New South Wales put out the last kind of part of our housing policy with the renters' rights package. Do you want to just quickly lay out the key parts of that we've been putting forward?
Yeah, so we want to freeze rents. We want to ensure that there's some leeway around the stress of rental increases. We want to ensure that there's some security as well for renters. Our policy speaks to the demand and the lack of supply for social and affordable housing right across the state. So we really want to put some measures in place that community can actually feel a sense of relief, but also can map out a future that is not going to be detrimental to, vulnerable people within our communities.
Yeah, I know, we've probably talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but that this growing criticism of the Greens that, you're anti-development. You say you want more affordable housing, but then you'll try to stop developments coming in your community. And which is why I think one of the things that the New South Wales Greens were talking about fairly early on is quite interesting around legislating that I think 10% of all new dwellings in New South Wales would have to be public and not-for-profit social housing, because I think, that's a good way to respond to that, right? It's sure, we want new, we'll need new housing developments, but it can't just be luxury apartments or expensive housing. It actually needs to include affordable housing.
Absolutely. And what we've actually put together is a model for human rights, a package which speaks to that housing and have a roof over your head is a human right. And so we want to address this as a part of social equity. Yeah.
And that's, I think that is the big difference, that the major parties just aren't even close to, they're not approaching the housing crisis from the same perspective, because they still see it as a commodity. It's a speculative, thing to be profited from. Whereas we're a home is a place that people live.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one, the other policy that I wanted to talk about is the First Nations justice policy that the New South Wales Greens have proposed, which, as I understand it, would be establishing a Truth and Justice Commission and an independent treaty commission, and interestingly, a referendum to create dedicated First Nations seats in Parliament. How's the response to that proposal been so far?
It's been really well received within our communities. I think New South Wales has really been on the back foot of, committing to a treaty pathway for this state. What we've seen around the country is, areas such as Victoria, Queensland, the Northern Territory, and South Australia actually, commit to this this pathway. It's been on my radar for some time, actually, around the lack of initiative from the major parties. So I think the community is really excited about the prospects of this actually getting up, but also the fact that here in New South Wales, we have the highest First Nations population in the country. And it's a part of, formalising some recognition for reconciliation in a just and proper way.
Yeah. And obviously the timing is there's been this whole messy, and I think for a lot of people very difficult conversation around the voice referendum at a federal level. And that's something that the federal party has been dealing with, and we've spoken a bit about on the podcast. But I think at the same time, being able to, at a state level, put forward a policy that shows what the Greens would actually want to see, that is this is how we could progress all elements of the Uluru Statement from the heart. I think that's quite a positive thing to be able to do, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it does speak to the Uluru Statement. In our position is truth-telling. We need to ensure that we actually reckon with our history and tell both sides of the story in a way in which we can come to common ground and form the basis of a relationship which is cohesive, which is based on peace, and which is based on, a future that we can both share proudly.
Yeah.
So that's the first element of the Truth and Justice Commission, and that will pretty much set up what a treaty framework could look like based on those that framework of truth and justice. The dedicated seats in Parliament is based on an international best practice model, not too far from home, which is New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to ensure that First Nations voices are heard in a way which gives them power, which gives them a sense of political autonomy, and ensure that they can actually elect their own representation in accordance with UNDRIP, or the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Yeah, so how do those seats work? Like, how many seats are there? How are they elected? Are they for particular areas or?
That's a really good question. And, we've had the ATSIC model, which, First Nations people hadn't to participate in a democratic election process. It's not an idea which is too, far removed. In terms of the detail, though, that will actually come out of the negotiations in the treaty development.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. And how's it been? Like, obviously, we've just lost a really fierce fighter for First Nations justice from the party. Like, Lydia Thorpe resigned, I guess it was maybe 2 weeks ago now. How's that been for you, kind of watching someone who fought for Black sovereignty within the Greens now leave the party to pursue that on a different path, while you're kind of still, I would imagine, pushing on that within the party? Like, how has that been for you in the middle of the campaign?
For me, it's been really exciting in terms of, the pathway that she's now going to tread. Mm. And in terms of progressing on the demands for treaty, she now has a position to advocate for, voices that are completely marginalised because they're deemed too radical.
Yeah.
So that's the excitement that I have now, and she has my full faith. And she's actually one of my sister girls, and so we support each other, indefinitely. And she's still backing me in my state election. She was actually very excited when she saw our policy proposal as well, and it actually gives meaning to the elements of the Uluru Statement. And I wish her well.
Yeah, it is I think that there are a lot of hot takes on Lydia's resignation and everything. But anyone that I actually speak to in the movement, or most people that I speak to in the movement are like, that's awesome. I hope she can win. As long as we're fighting for a lot of the same things, really. And it'll be interesting to see what she can achieve as an independent. Still very early days. I think that but at the same time, it'll be interesting to see what, as a party, we can achieve for the Black sovereignty movement. And particularly if we do pick up, more seats in New South Wales Parliament, would we be looking at, are we going for a balance of power situation in state parliament as well?
That is the situation. It's currently within our discussions and our radar that we are in a strong spot to actually take up balance of power negotiations, and it's something that we're considering very heavily.
Yeah. And have there been, discussions about, I imagine probably media as well have been pressing, okay, so if you're in balance of power, what are your number one demands going to be? Have we come out and said, it'll be no new coal and gas or housing or, anything like that? Or is it still kind of, we're keeping a little bit, I guess, we're keeping it a mystery for now?
Yeah, at this point in time, it's still within the works. It's still within negotiations amongst the party.
Yeah, because there's a bunch, probably don't have time to get into all of them, but there's a bunch of exciting things in the platform. Obviously, free and accessible public transport. I'm a big free public transport fan. Not all of the states, not all the Greens member bodies, I think, yet have a policy for free public transport, but I'm in Queensland. We have been pushing free public transport, and New South Wales Greens are as well. Are there, what other kind of big issues have you found are really resonating with people on the ground?
Because I'm a rural and regional woman, and obviously the rise and cost of living is impacting us very deeply in those areas, but also access to health. So regional health and the lack of, doctors within those areas is really obvious and it's evident. So what I've been having discussions about is ensuring that we actually, reform the way that the health system is operating within the state.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that we have Dr. Amanda Kong as number 2 on the ticket, who is a regional doctor and has, that experience within those communities. And as a First Nations woman, for us to travel to appropriate health clinics, we have to travel. We have to travel far distances. So it's those issues within our communities that the policy development actually speaks to. It's those vulnerable, most marginalised communities. Also, teaching, because I'm a former teacher as well.
Oh, okay.
Well, education. Yeah. Regional schools are in dire shape. You know, we need to ensure that governments are committing outside of, you know, the greater Sydney region across the dividing range. So for me, I really want to see improvement in those particular areas as it pertains to First Nations justice, but also our most, you know, lower socioeconomic communities, and also the housing crisis.
Yeah.
You know, there are areas within this state where the climate and the weather actually stems to over 40 degrees plus, and there are elders without air conditioners.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's these families and these communities that I'm fighting for. And as it stands, I'm feeling that we're only just starting to pick up what it actually looks like in terms of coming from those very, very marginalised areas.
Yeah. It's those basic necessities, right? Like, I think it's interesting. I mean, I haven't been following the New South Wales election super closely, but I really haven't seen all that much from the major parties in terms of like drastically changing people's experience of those basic services. Like, I think I saw, the Libs will give people some back to school vouchers. Labor and I think maybe some other parties are talking about scrapping stamp duty, which I think, maybe makes sense and is like a minor kind of reform to the housing crisis. But it's not that like fundamental radical change about actually meeting our schooling resource standard, for example, in state schools, and actually abolishing state school fees. Like I know that that's something we have talked about in Queensland before, and reframing the whole way that we think about housing. It's just this like tinkering around the edges from the major parties, which I think people are surely getting pretty sick of when it comes to those fundamental things they need.
Absolutely. So, what we've seen just in the last 2 decades is politics as usual from the major parties. And, the younger generation especially, I'm really, really sick of that. I feel, the Greens, we are the party of the young, the woke, as I'd like to say it,
We did an episode, I'm laughing because we literally just did an episode on the podcast about like, what does woke mean? So our listeners will be like,
Oh, deadly. Yeah, so it's not about, politics as usual and business as usual frameworks. We are here to ensure that we see radical change, transformative change. And, if anything, it's the party of activists, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very proud to be a part of that.
Yeah. And meanwhile, like honestly, a lot of what I have seen from up in Queensland of the New South Wales election has been like a bunch of Lib scandals. There was the stuff about, I've seen a fair bit of stuff about pokies. Obviously, the Greens still have the strongest policies around, a super tax on pokies and cashless gaming and bet limits and eventually getting them out of pubs and clubs. But even the Libs now having like a better policy than Labor on pokies.
Yeah.
But do you think with all of the stuff that's been surrounding the Liberals, there's this perception, I think, that like it's a shoo-in for Labor and like the polling is showing them ahead, and it seems like there's like Perrottet in a Nazi costume, there's the ICAC investigations, now his brother is getting like pursued by police for corruption or something, there's MPs sharing revenge porn of political rivals, but like, do you think that all of this is enough to actually for Labor to win it?
I think, the circus surrounding the coalition, people are really seeing the instability there. And some of what I'm hearing from the communities as well is that they're not actually familiar enough with Labor and their policies. So it's kind of voting for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting run over the next 5 weeks in terms of Labor boosting their messaging around how they're going to create change for this state.
Yeah, because if now thinking about it, it's like the fact that all I've seen is this stuff about the scandals and the chaos around the Liberals. Maybe they are just trying to repeat what they did in the federal election, where it was like Scott Morrison went to Hawaii and the Liberals are chaotic, and so vote for us. What are our policies? Doesn't matter. We're not the Liberals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, just within my generation, we've seen Labor come out and still hold the same values as the Libs.
Yeah. I guess, maybe they are banking on the same thing happening as it did in federal, and maybe it does. It will be really interesting to see if it does, because we'll then have Labor governments. If New South Wales Labor win, that's Labor governments in every state and territory except for Tasmania, which is like, I mean, when you then have to demonstrate what your actual policies are, maybe people will start demanding more. I mean, they already are demanding more, and it probably could just accelerate that clear drift away from the major parties, which we saw in the federal election. I think that we're going to keep seeing across the country in every election.
Absolutely. And if anything, the spotlight was on the Greens side. But and that still filtered down into Victoria with the results there. We expect the same drive here in New South Wales. If anything, it will be stronger. That's my kind of feeling and sentiment around it. And, I don't think we should also underestimate the independents as well, in that people are, doing a protest vote these days.
So do you have Teals in the New South Wales election?
And yes, we do. Yeah.
Are they running in any seats that are like in direct competition with the Greens, like our key seats?
No, I don't believe so. Okay. But we should never underestimate them as well.
Yeah.
With the Teals, though, they are predominantly a Sydney-based campaign. So outside of the Greater Sydney region, I'm not too familiar with many independents or Teal representatives, regionally or remote.
Interesting, yeah. Because they didn't do too well in the Victorian state election, or I guess less well than anticipated, right? And I don't know, I'm not a massive fan of the Teals, as listeners of the podcast will know. But I think I'm curious to see, whether they can ever replicate the results that they saw in 2022 federal.
Yeah.
So what are we really gunning for from the Greens in New South Wales in terms of how many seats we think we can pick up in the lower house and the upper house?
It's a very exciting time. There has been some news on the ground around the movement in the Shoalhaven electorate and in Lismore as well. We've come out gunning for those areas, and people, especially in the Lismore region, want to see change on the ground now, not, reactive measures, which we've seen from the devastation caused by the floods. We want to see action done immediately. And that is really becoming more evidence in those northern region areas, northern rivers areas, sorry.
Yeah. Lismore is interesting. I want to talk about Lismore, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my little bit of background research on the state of play in New South Wales. So we've got Jamie Parker in Balmain is retiring, so presumably we'll be trying to hold that.
Yes.
And Kobe Shetty is running to take that seat. We've got Jenny Long up for re-election in Newtown and Tamara Smith in Ballina. And then it seems to me like Lismore is the next winnable. So we've got, I think, so in 2019, the last state election, we got 24.3% of the primary vote. But it's worth noting that was after the Labor MP's resignation. And our vote actually went backwards slightly from the previous election where we'd finished second. So how do we think we'll be able to knock votes off that Labor MP, Janelle Saffin, who was previously at a federal level, and get to that second place so that we can actually take Lismore?
At the end of the day, it's going to have to come down to community will around, the change that they want to see and the representation they actually want to see. Adam Guise is on the ground there, and I feel that, particularly in that area, it's those mob who have the lived experience of losing their homes, of having to pick their lives up not once but twice, that can actually speak to that, that proper representation matters. Yeah, I don't have a direct answer around how we can actually take this seat, but it for me, it's about lobbying the truth, because it's about, speaking truth to power. And that essentially will be the change maker in terms of how people get out on polling day.
Yeah. What has the field campaign been like in some of these seats like Lismore and, even I'm sure others that could potentially be in the mix to me, like South Coast and like Heffron? Is there a really big ground campaign there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Our candidate for Shoalhaven is currently the mayor for the region based on a populist vote. So as I understand it, she's, time will tell, but there's a really great groundswell in those particular areas to back the Greens, but also, the people who, once again, at the forefront of these communities, walking the talk and, ensuring that the state government, whoever it is being held to account.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I definitely would love to see Lismore turn green. It just fucking makes sense.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like I said, I went to school there, and I actually just a couple of weeks ago finally went and visited Lismore for the first time since the floods. And it's still it's still clearly post-disaster mode. A lot of houses are still abandoned and a lot of shops in the CBD aren't open. I went and visited my old high school, which is getting demolished. And I can't imagine that the fact that this flood was, at least in large part, caused by a climate crisis driven by coal and gas, which both major parties continue to approve, continue to back, that won't be on people's minds when they head to the booth next month. So yes, I'm interested to see that. And then in terms of the upper house, we've got, so is it like Kate Fairman is up for re-election, and plus Amanda Cohn, who you mentioned just before, and then you're in that third spot. Is what swing do we need to actually get those 3 quotas?
That's a really good question, and it's one where I don't have the answer for, unfortunately.
That's fine. I think because when I was looking at it, I think we made in 2019, we got like 2.14 of a quota. So I imagine it's no small ask, obviously, to bump that up to 3. It'll be, it's going to take hard work. But I know that the statewide polling has shown the Greens vote rising. I think it's sitting at 12% at the moment.
Yeah.
Is that is 12%, would it need to be a little higher than that to secure your spot?
I believe we need 0.5%.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously that's many votes when you're talking statewide.
Absolutely.
But when you are seeing that shift away from the major parties, it's within reach. And I think that's why, we were keen to do an episode on the New South Wales state election and be like, for anyone who is in New South Wales right now, either thinking, I'm not too sure, what's at stake here, or can we really pick anything up new and significant, or our vote's been increasing across the board, so I don't really need to do anything. It's like it's actually that knife edge where the difference will be, can you pick up the phone and make calls for your local branch? Can you be there on election day handing out how to vote cards on the doors, letterboxing, whatever it is, could make the difference between you, Lynda, being in Parliament and not at the end of March.
Absolutely. And the reality there is that if it's not me, it could potentially be a member of the Shooters Party. It could be One Nation. That's the extreme, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what could happen. So since the announcement, the party has done everything possible to ensure that, we get our asses off and out there into community to get, all 3 of us into the upper house. Because, we're going to see more right-wing conservatives in Parliament.
Yeah. So that third spot could come down to basically Shooters and Fishers, One Nation, or Greens. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
That's not terrifying.
It's pretty scary. And pretty terrifying.
All right. Yes. Please, people, go door knock. And even if, I think we've said this on the show before, but I've noticed even for folks who are outside of New South Wales, there are nationwide calling parties that people can chip in from outside. And obviously, if you have, cash to spare, I'm sure that donations are needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ladies, if there is anything that you'd like to do to help, give the campaign state team a call. We'd love to see you on the front line with us.
Yeah. Can people do the online sign up that would just be, the /New South Wales /volunteer. Can people sign up there and they'll get a call from one of the campaigns? Is that how that's working at the moment?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure of the process and the procedure, but I'd imagine it would work that way.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, we can put links in the show notes for people to get involved. But what's the next few weeks looking like for you? I think you were saying that you're traveling at the moment. I imagine you've been doing stuff all over the state.
Yeah. At this point in time, I'm in Sydney, about to leave in the next half hour down to the far south coast to have a talk with the local Aboriginal community around Aboriginal cultural fishing rights and the penalisation and criminalisation of community who are, essentially just practising their traditional culture, their right to self-determine their lives, but also to continue their traditional practices of gathering native seed resources.
Yeah. And so forgive my ignorance because we don't have an upper house in Queensland, so I'm not totally across how it works. Do you have like particular regions in the upper house that different people run for, or is it just the whole state that you're running to represent?
It's a statewide.
Whole state quota system. So you really are, I imagine you've been traveling top to bottom all over the place.
Yeah. I've been trying to get around to all the different parts of country, regional, remote, coastal, the cities, the towns, just to, let mob know that I'm running. I come from a very common Aboriginal family here in New South Wales. And when I've heard that, especially from, our MPs going out and having conversations in their campaign trail, is that mob are really excited and want to have a yarn. We're starting to become approached by different communities, which is really telling in terms of mob wanting to hear our policies and our vision for the future. So I'm doing my best to get across wherever I can.
Yeah, all right.
If there was ever a time that I could, duplicate myself, now would be it. Yeah.
Get someone else. Someone else at a fundraiser. You're at a door knock. That's what yes, the number of times I've thought if we could just clone our candidates, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
But since we can't, I guess that's why we need volunteers. So again, we'll probably leave it there. But if anyone is listening and wondering how to get involved, check the links in the show notes. If you're in New South Wales, contact your branch, contact your local campaign, particularly, if you're in one of those seats, obviously crucial that we retain those seats like Balmain and Newtown and Ballina. If you're in Lismore, if you're in Shoalhaven, if you're in Heffron, if you're in Summerhill, Albury, all of these seats seemed like they were kind of in the mix and potentially winnable, and they'll all help contribute to our upper house campaigns to get those 3 MPs elected in the upper house there. So please chip in what you can. Is there anything else that you wanted to shout out or let people know before we wrap things up?
No, just, at this point in time in the history of this country, we need more First Nations and people of colour in politics, in Parliament, to ensure those voices are heard. Usually, it's always a white dominant space. And so how can we have a diverse view or engage in, political conversations which represent these communities? It's timely, especially here in New South Wales, which has been transformed to a police state, that a black radical is being, given the chance to take a seat in there. Because if I do, I intend to shake shit up. And so let's do the work. Let's, get out there and create change.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to see you in Parliament. Let's do it.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks again for coming on the show, Lynda. Good luck.
Thank you.
Go outside. Touch grass. Go outside. Touch grass. Go outside. Touch grass.
Thanks, Lynda. Thanks, Emerald. Good interviewing.
Thank you so much, Tom. You didn't even hear it because you refused to listen to 2 women speaking. But for people who don't mind listening to 2 women speaking, you should tell us with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now. It really helps spread the word and get the show out there. Similarly, if you share our stuff or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, we're at Serious Danger AU, and you can message us there as well, or you can email us hello@seriousdangerpod.com. All the info's at seriousdangerpod.com, and so that's our show, folks. It's the end of Serious Danger podcast for this week.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll
That's,
see you next
that's
week.
pretty much it.
Yeah, good wrap up.
That's just about all I've got. All I've got left.
All right, shut up. Goodbye.
Serious danger to Australia.